Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marilyn if you're new here, and today I'm doing a tag. I was tagged to do the Read Smart tag by Pat from Book Chat with Pat and Jay from Jay Shay. And I thought I want to do this tag because I want to know myself if I read smart. And this was co-created by Ruben at To Readers It May Concern in collaboration with Emmelie at Prose and Petticoats. And I took a look at their channels, and they're really smart people. So if you really need tips on reading smart, they're the people to go to. But I have a few tips of my own, having lived 8 decades on this planet and reading for almost 8 decades. So let's start with the questions. I might read some of the questions out of turn, so I'll let you know. The first question is, what is your strategy to stay focused and engaged while reading? I don't force it. I rely on the choosing of my books, the right book at the right time, to keep me engaged. So I think it's the author's style, the author's writing, theme, topic, that's going to be the right book for me. So I don't force myself to stay engaged with a book that's not working for me. So, but I do have some tips. Of course, if I'm not in a good frame of mind, if I'm experiencing some mental health anxiety, for example, I know that there's certain books that will be better than other books. I might have to read a short book. I might have to read maybe a few lines of poetry. I might have to read nonfiction, a self-help book. All of these don't work in the same for the same situations, but that's what I usually do. So I'm going to expand on this question by saying that my education was a choppy one. When I went to school in the 50s, we weren't, reading wasn't the be all and end all. And yes, I was a good reader, and I did get some props for that. Outside of class, I might have gotten criticism for that, especially later on. But my education was choppy. I was going to a school in a very low income neighborhood, and even that wasn't the whole deal, because we did have we had a good education even in the lower income until you got up to maybe junior high. But like I said, reading wasn't the be all and end all. You had to be good at handwriting. Your penmanship had to be good. You had to be good at arithmetic and not counting on your fingers, which I was wanted to because math wasn't my strong point. And you also had to be good at home economics, and that meant sewing and cooking. And I sucked at all of these things. The only thing I did well was maybe write essays with my bad penmanship. My penmanship did get better as I got older. But I was slapped on my wrist a few times with the ruler for that, for not writing properly. And we had to write on the board. Penmanship was really important at that time. And I'm glad I did have that skill, because now I'm learning that cursive writing is not a thing anymore, or not as much as it used to be. So back to my choppy education. So that was one thing. And then, so I was like a B- student most of my elementary school. And then I went on to junior high, we called it. They call it in Hawaii intermediate school. And I was very lucky to be put in a talent class. Well, we had an African-American teacher, Mr. Nelson, who he taught us Negro spirituals. We sang, we put on plays. It was 2 periods of the day, and I felt for the first time in my life competent, because at that time I could sing, I could memorize lines. In fact, I was given the lead of the 9th grade play The King and I was Anna, and I had to memorize a lot of lines, a lot of songs, and I don't remember having any problem doing it. I think my mother helped me with going over the lines a few times, but I really loved that class, and I sort of blossomed. Unfortunately, when I got into high school, I went to a high school in we were bused from poor neighborhoods to wealthier neighborhoods, and I went to a high school that was in a very expensive neighborhood, and we were the train kids, the bussed in kids, and we really weren't prepared. I had thought I was going to go to an academic program, because at that time they had academic programs, commercial programs, and general programs. The academic program was if you were going to college. Commercial was typing and stenography and all that jazz. And general was for the students who were going to work in a vocational or who were slow, but not slow enough to be put in a special needs class, which weren't called that, by the way. Were called really bad things. But anyway, yeah, and at the same time, my home life was getting very, very difficult, and I had to work 2 jobs to keep us eating. I had to work in school for a teacher, and I also had to work at a community center. So I didn't have time to study as much as I needed to, and I really needed to study a lot. To put a long story short, make a long story short, I went into the commercial program, and I sucked at typing and stenography, so it looked like school wasn't going to work out for me, and my home life got really bad, and I kind of decided that I was going to get married, because that was the only way to leave an unhappy home. I mean, I wasn't going to run away or do anything drastic, but I had a Latino father who said, that's the only way you're going to leave this house. So I would say not the first guy who asked me, but the first good guy that asked me, I got married. Now, when I went back for my senior year at this same school, I was expelled. I was expelled because I was married. I wasn't pregnant. Just because I was married, they said I couldn't continue my senior year because I would be a bad influence on the other students. Of course, this would never happen today. Even pregnant students go to school. So I was crushed. I was crushed, but I wasn't defeated. And I said that I was going to get my GED and go on to college. And I did. I got my GED, studied by myself. This was a couple of years later, and I already had my first child, but I still kept studying and taking one class at a time. And I think that's where I regained my self-confidence a little bit about smart. All of this time I was reading. I never stopped reading. Even when I was kicked out of school, I always went to the library. I even went from Brooklyn to Manhattan and bought books sometimes. So I was always reading. I always remembered what I read, and I'll get onto tips. But it was having these teachers in the early 70s in these community colleges that really helped me learn how to read effectively. And I'm going to share a few things with you right now. I had a very wonderful hippie teacher. He was part-time college instructor and a part-time masseuse right in my town, because I went to junior college right in my town, community college it's called here. And he said, no tests. I don't believe in tests. What you have to do, for every chapter you read, you have to write 10 questions about what you read. And all the class said, yay, no tests, you know. But then we realized this is harder than it looks, because when you write questions about what you're reading, you're forced to examine the author's theme and the characters and motivation and story and you begin to think, okay, what did they mean by that? Or why is this character doing this? And I found that my understanding of the text was 100% better by just writing questions down. So if I have to give a tip, if you want to stay motivated or engaged, and you're finding that you're not engaged but you want to keep on reading that book, write down questions that come up when you're reading, because that really helped me. So, was that enough for that question? Today, what keeps me engaged is when I do a buddy read or something for reading for an event, and an event that I really care about. I found that I can't do every event, but when I do a buddy read with the smart, wonderful people that I've done buddy reads with, I always learn something from them, because you always forget something. You always miss something. Another tip I have, well, that will come in another question. I think I answered that question. I'm going to go to the third question and then go to the second. The third question is, what methods do you use to retain and recall information from what you've read? So I talked about that already, but also doing buddy reads keeps you disciplined, and keeps you disciplined to report to the other people that you're doing buddy reads with. So I find that I'm not a big note writer, but I find that when I really like a book, another tip is I go back and read it again. I do that when I really like a book, but I also do it when the book is, sometimes your mind wanders. Just go back and read. Go back to the go back to the beginning of the chapter. And that seems to help me. It also, when I'm reading a book I really love, going back and just having those words just invade your entire being makes me very happy, as well as retain and recall the information. Then I'll go back to 2, is how does your environment influence your focus, and what can you do to optimize it? Now, I am in a kind of different situation than a lot of people. I live with my daughter, my partner, and my daughter's about to get married, so that we're going to have an extra person in the house, and my house is not big. So I tend to not be able to read in public spaces. My daughter watches TV in the living room. We have a tiny living room. And my partner is doing work. He works at home and he's doing work. So, yeah, and then I'm doing other things during the day. So I'm a night reader. So I've tried to think of how I could change my environment. And I don't think it's going to be possible, because I'm not the type of person to read outside. I used to be able to read at the beach, and I destroyed a few books doing that, so I don't do that anymore. And also, the sun glare, and even though I have anti-glare eyeglasses, it's really not a pleasant way. I also should mention that my neighborhood is very noisy, so it kind of takes away the ability to change my environment, unless I would move, and there's no way I could move. I live in Hawaii, where I'm just lucky to have a house. so I don't think that I'm going to be changing my environment, but it does influence my focus. Also, the fact that I don't listen to audiobooks. I find that my attention wanders too much, and I'm not good at multitasking. So yeah, so that's not going to work for me. Let me get to the next question. 4, how do you approach difficult or challenging material? I haven't had this problem until I started reading more challenging material. I find that when I have a challenging book to read, that's when the writing of the questions and maybe using some other books that I remember reading Frankenstein with Sarah from Sarah Wallace from Roadworthy, and this was material that was completely very foreign to me. I don't read books like this, or I didn't. And what I did was I got a copy of the book that had annotations already in it and explanations. So this made it easier, plus talking to Sarah about the book. So I think that I'm learning so much from the buddy reads. So yeah, so I would get a book, if I had to read a difficult book that was I found too difficult for me, I would get some auxiliary literature to help me. And in fact, I have something coming up that I did just that. Also, I had COVID when I went to Paris this last time in 2023. It was very hot, and I was stuck in a very hot apartment without air conditioning, and I ended up reading Of Human Bondage while I had a high fever. Now, if I can do that and stay, I thought this book was not, first of all, it was a chunker. Second of all, I'm thinking, should I read this? Why does she have this book here? Why is this the only English language book, I was at an Airbnb, that this host had? And it does have there's a French connection in the book. But when I started reading it, I realized, give it a chance. And I did that, even though I wasn't engaged in the beginning. And I started getting engaged, and I had nothing else to do except be sick. And I read that whole book within the 4 days that I was in bed with COVID. And if I can do that, and it wasn't a 5-star book, but it was pretty close. So that gave me impetus to read difficult books. But it has to be a book that I can get through. It has to be a book that becomes engaging at some point. Okay, so the next question is, what role do note-taking and annotation play in your reading process? And I think that I talked a little bit about that. I don't do annotation. And I did do annotation when I was in school, but now I just write a note. If it's my book and I intend to keep it, sometimes I'll write something in the book, not in a library book, of course, but I'll do that. Something that I forgot to say that helps me when I was doing homework, reading books for homework or doing tests, was I get my table and I clean it and I set one place and make everything really clean, my space for reading or studying. And that also is a tip that might help you. But since I've joined BookTube, maybe I've taken notes only when I have to answer to a buddy reader and say, well, what did you think of the book? And I might say, well, I need to take a note to remember. So when we do Voxer, I can remember what I read and remember what was important in that particular chapter. Okay, 6. How do you balance reading for pleasure with reading for personal and professional development? I only read for pleasure right now. I'm not saying that personal development is not important to me, but it's still pleasure. I'm reading for pleasure. Whatever I read now, it's going to be for pleasure. Of course, at one point I was trying to learn a language, so I guess that was personal development. And I do all the things that I mentioned, like when I'm, as if I was going to have to report to school. So I that's how I treat that. There's only 2 questions left. And 7, what is the importance of setting reading goals? I'm against it. I'll tell you why. Since I started BookTube and I see people, setting goals and numbers and events, and just counting them off. That was taking away my love of reading a little bit. I don't, the first year, I think I spoke about this, I'm going to read 200 books, and I made it, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. So just for the Goodreads, just to say, keep track of what I'm reading, I put down 50 books every, just as a goal on Goodreads. And that's working for me. And if I don't make 50, I made 50 and it's June, but if I don't make that many books, that's fine. I think that we put too much pressure on ourselves, especially as booktubers. So I'm against numbers. I'm against having to show a certain amount of books every week, every month. And this makes me think of Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading. She doesn't feel, she shows one book and that's fine. And I get more out of it when she does that, because it also makes me feel, wow, I don't have to keep up with all these booktubers who are doing these big numbers, because there are successful, wonderful people like Kelly who don't read 100 books at a time, that are wonderful booktubers, and I can be like that, and I am like that. The number 8 is, what are some strategies for overcoming reading slumps or lack of motivation? Again, go with the flow. If you don't feel like reading, you don't feel like reading. Maybe you can talk about something else on BookTube. That doesn't mean you have to not do BookTube or not film a video. It can mean that you can do a tag like I'm doing now, or about reading slumps. I don't think I've ever been in a total reading slump, except like when I was saying when I was either having a baby or sick in some way or ill, except when I had COVID when I was reading. But I've never had a big reading slump. But then lack of motivation, that is a general term. And that could be a lack of motivation for a lot of different things, not just reading. Sometimes you're just not in a space where, for example, I have to exercise every day, but sometimes I lack motivation for that. So what do? I don't force myself to the point where I have to walk up 6 flights of stairs. I do that maybe 2 times a week. But I find that if I force myself to do anything, I'm going to be unhappy. And life is too short to be unhappy. So if you have slumps or lack of motivation, just my advice is to go with the flow and go with your feelings and be kind to yourself. Always be kind to yourself. So I'm going to tag a few people. A lot of people have been tagged already, and I was trying to think of people who haven't been tagged. You don't have to do the tag, but I'm going to tag Berna at Berna's Bookish Adventures. Check out her channel. She's a Turkish booktuber. She does her booktube in English, but she's a wonderful person, and please check her out. Jim at Books and Reading and Stuff, or Books and Reading and Stuff. He started about the same time I did, and I always look at his channel from time to time. Sonia at An Enthusiastic Reader. I think she's been already tagged, but if you haven't and want to do the tag, please do it. And of course, Gina from Gina Stan Your Books. Very kind booktuber. We like a lot of the same books. Some of the books we don't like, but some of the books that we like, we really, really like. So that's my video for today. I hope I haven't bored you with all my backstory, but I felt it was important to show you why some of these read smart questions don't apply to me, or maybe apply in a different way. I don't think that, maybe I never thought I was smart, and people and circumstances made me feel I wasn't smart, but now I realize that even if I'm not as smart as some other booktubers are, I can learn from them. And if I don't learn from them, I can admire them. Both learn and admire them and become smarter. And it's not a goal of mine to become smarter or to even read smarter. It's a goal of mine to be happy and make friends on booktube. And hopefully somebody will like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep my channel alive. So thank you so much for watching if you've got to the end. And I will see you soon in a new video. So aloha, everyone.